Ready?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Let me get my screen set up. Perfect. So thank you for joining us for the last webinar of this calendar year for new and prospective program directors, a Q&A session. This is going to be a great group, and we're going to get a lot of perspective from different programs, and we hope to hear from you as well. So especially at this session, feel free to chime in with questions. Put them in the chat, send them to the participants, anything like that. Just a quick reminder about some of the stuff that NACC does for those of you that don't know. We have a lot of programs and meetings coming up, especially our member meeting, November 17th in Atlanta, the day before our NOVA conference. We'll be hosting it so that people can participate online as well as in person. So keep that in mind and keep an eye out for the most recent editions of NACC News to see what's new with us. So I will introduce our moderator today, and then we will get started. So our panel today is moderated by Will Brown, who is a professor as well as the director of the Center for Nonprofits and Philanthropy at the Bush School of Government and Public Service at Texas A&M. He's also one of my bosses, so he's great.
That's right.
Go ahead and get started.
One of several, Nicole.
One of several.
That's right. And I'm coming in. I'll be NACC board president, I guess, or NACC president.
Yes.
Coming at the November annual meeting. So I'll be taking that on for 2 years as well. So thanks for coming today. We got a great panel. I think I'm just going to kind of go on ahead and introduce let each one of them so you can see there. So Laura Dietrich, University of San Diego, Wes Lindahl, North Park University, and Sylvia DeHaas Phillips. Sorry, I don't think I've done that one before. Bay Path University. With that, Sylvia, why don't we let you go first and do a little intro, introduce yourself.
Sure.
Give us a
All
little
right,
bit
let
of
me just
background.
share my screen. So I'm gonna, hi everybody, Sylvia DeHaas Phillips. I'm at Bay Path University. We're located in Longmeadow, Massachusetts, which is in the western part of the state, about an hour and a half west of Boston. And what I was planning on doing is just quickly walking you through what our program is. I won't take too much time on that. And then as requested, I'm going to talk a little bit about, some of the things that I've learned, some of the challenges, and actually some of the things I wish I would have known before I started at Bay Path. Just a little background on me. I have been with Bay Path since 2007. I started as an adjunct faculty member and been teaching online since then. And I took over from my colleague that a number of you know, Jeff Grine, in 2016. And I like to let, when I'm doing orientations and new student presentations, I let them know about the experience I have in the field, mainly because my experience is very reflective of the faculty that we have. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. So we're a relatively small school. I would say that I have 50 students at any given time, but as you can see here, we have 2 different degree options. One is in nonprofit management and philanthropy, and one is in strategic fundraising and philanthropy. We actually have embedded a strategic fundraising certificate into the nonprofit degree, which has actually been very interesting to prospective students. And we have different tracks in terms of our fundraising. One is on the higher ed, and one is focused on advancement. And we partner with our degree in higher education administration in that degree. So just a quick overview, all of our programs, except for our certificates, which are 5 courses, by the way, and 15 credits and totally transferable to our degrees, are 36 credits. We have some common core. There are some things that are specifically focused on each of the tracks that people want to be in. And then we also changed some of our criteria, and this is for a very deliberate reason, and giving them more elective options. So now they can take 4 electives, which means that they can customize their experience a little bit more than they had been in the past, which is actually one of the lessons learned that I had, which was that it was very hard for students to be able to take many of the courses that they wanted to take. And this way it gives them an option to look at some other things that are interesting to them. We, like many of you, run an 8-week accelerated classes. We teach 48 weeks a year with just a couple of breaks within the year. And I mentioned a little bit earlier about my experience, and all of our faculty are practitioners and experts in the fields that they teach. So the capital campaign or plan giving or whatever it is that we offer. And I'm sure it's true in a lot of programs, but we definitely look to hire people that are practitioners because our program is so applied. We really think about it as a theory of practice program. I wanted to just quickly, I'm not going to go into a lot of details on this, but you can see this is what it is that we have to do as a department chair at Bay Path. And again, I think it's because we're such a small school. Bay Path itself has about 3,000 students. Our graduate school is somewhere around 1,500. And so when you become a program chair in a small school like ours, in many ways, you're kind of a chief cook and bottle washer. So I work a lot with administration, with admissions, with marketing, etc. And we're also a non-tenured university and teaching focused. And so I'll be curious to hear about some of my colleagues, but we are required to teach 6 classes a year in addition to chairing the department. It's a lot. I know, I'm looking at your face, Nicole. Yeah, and so I just wanted to give people kind of a context in terms of what it is that all of our program chairs are required to do regardless of the degree. So I thought a little bit about the things that I wished I would known. And even so, as I noted here, one of the things that was great for me was that I did know the program director and I knew the university. So I understood the culture of the organization, which was really, really helpful in the transition. And I think my experience as teaching as an adjunct gave me that opportunity. And my predecessor had allowed me to do some of the capstone, which gave me sort of a bigger picture about what was going on with students. For us, and again, this is just because of the nature of our program, industry experience is really, really important in terms of the faculty that we bring together. And what I've learned from a lot of our students is that they want to have immediate application of the material that we're covering in the curriculum. And many of them do report that. And so we tell them they're actually going to walk away with a toolbox, and they don't want to wait till the end. They want to know what it is that they can apply right now. We have had a growing younger population of students in our program. And so when I say here the diversity of learned experience, it's really around where people are in their careers, which has been really, really terrific, but it's also been a challenge in terms of making sure that the curriculum meets the needs of people that are very, very early in their career versus much later in their career. Certainly marketing and competition. We do work a lot with our marketing department. I am far from a marketing expert, but I think it's really important to know what differentiates your program from other ones. And it seems like an obvious thing, but it's something that I've had to spend a lot of time on in terms of looking at it. And one of the things that I learned as well is that even with instructors that I have that have taught at other programs, a number of our adjunct faculty and part-time faculty have taught at BU and Merrimack and a lot of other different schools, but our philosophy is a little bit different in our approach. And so you want to make sure that whoever you bring on is not just an expert in the field, but also understands the philosophy and the approach of the program that they are teaching in. Right in the beginning, I took advantage of every single thing that I could, especially with our distributed learning people. We've been teaching online since 2007. And I'll be honest with you, certainly I had experience as an instructor, but I didn't have a lot of experience in terms of overseeing other people in learning how to teach online. And so it's been really important to try to find mentors and advisors and experts within the university to help me make that transition. We try to keep our curriculum, I'm sure like many of you, really current on industry trends and what's considered best practice in the field. And I noted this earlier is that small schools are really, really different than big schools. It's kind of obvious. So for example, unlike many of you, we do not have a center on nonprofits. We just don't have the staff or capacity. So what we've started to do is really reach out to community-based organizations and trade organizations to create partnerships with them so that we can address some of the capacity needs of nonprofits in our community, but we cannot run that ourselves. And I guess the last thing that I would say is that it's really, really important to be flexible. I'll be honest, as well as I knew Bay Path, as well as I knew my predecessor, I didn't know a lot about the full scope of expectations. And I think you just have to be really open and flexible in terms of being able to adapt. So that's it for me right now. I'm trying to keep it brief, and I'll be available to answer questions. Thanks so much, Nicole.
Oh, that's me where I'm supposed to introduce the next guy. Sorry. Sylvia, you did great. I appreciate it. I forgot. Laura, why don't you go ahead and go next, if that's all right. Sorry, you're drinking. You ready?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to be a little less formal. A lot of the same things that were just said. I mean, we have a lot of similarities, and I'd love for us to get to conversation. But let me just tell you a little bit about, I mean, many of you have been to our NOVA. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir looking at who's on here and know our program really well. But we are the University of San Diego, not the UC San Diego. So we're the small Catholic college on the hill. We are really fortunate, and I think our strong suit is to be located within the School of Leadership and Education Sciences. So we are not in the business school. We are not in the college. We are not part of a PA program. We don't even have a PA program at USD. So we're really kind of able to move and groove. We have a School of Peace and Justice across the way from us, which has kind of caused some interesting interactions in terms of where does, nonprofit or NGO or social movement work or social enterprise live, and that's sort of an ongoing conundrum for us to figure out. And I'm sure some of you have struggled with that over time. We started as a master's program. It was started by a woman that many of you may know. She was a part of NACC for a while as well. Her name was Pat Libby. And when Pat built the program, so that was 20 years ago, if you can believe that. Our MA turns 20 years old this year. And we started with this MA program, and it was built like a nonprofit, right? And the reason I can tell you this is I am homegrown. I was in the first cohort of that MA. I'm a former executive director of a nonprofit. As I've moved further and further away from practice, in terms of that space, I'm much more an academic, but an accidental academic at the time anyway. She built the program like a nonprofit from the outside in, building it with the community, which caused, some interesting bumps and transitions into a university setting where, faculty was in charge of governance, and we had no faculty, permanently assigned faculty, or any tenure line faculty for at least the first 5 or 6 years of our work. And we borrowed from our multidisciplinary leadership studies faculty. We also started a research center at the time, and that's proved to be an interesting part of our history. So it was endowed by a family named the Castor family, and it was embedded within the department. And we pushed a lot of research through here over the years, and I'll show you some of that in a second, and really embedded our students and allowed us to tap into our PhD program as well. And our PhD students were situated in the center on full GA ships. We had a transition in deans, like happens so often. And the dean at the time decided to bifurcate the centers from the departments, which has been beneficial in some ways and difficult to manage in other ways. So for me, not wanting to, get rid of our secret sauce, I remained both in the center as the associate director and on the faculty as a professor of practice. I am not in a tenure line position. I'm the director of our master's degree program and our undergraduate programming. And we do not have a director of our PhD program. It kind of runs with all the faculty involved, and I'll talk about that in a second. We had this initial gift, and the fact that we treated this like a nonprofit really institutionalized the work. The bifurcation of the two units has caused some confusion between alumni. They sometimes think they're giving to the program, they're really giving to the center. And but we constantly, we're really lucky. We have a fantastic center director who still believes in student development, and a lot of our original mission stays intact in terms of the vision of the center. But the center is fully self-sustaining and provides a lot of research in the community, and provides what I would say all of our professional development. And the department retains all of the degree bearing units, right? So the MA, the PhD in leadership studies, the undergraduate minor, and we have certificates in arts and cultural leadership, a standalone, very introductory nonprofit management certificate that's online. We have a policy advocacy emphasis, and we're launching a fundraising certificate. So that's kind of how our program lays out. These are all, I mean, these reports have been produced by students, I mean, and the center over the years, and many of you and I have talked about these over time. Many presentations, book chapters, whatnot. We were very fortunate to be joined by two. I am partnered with two tenure line faculty now, Dr. Marcus Lamb, who just received tenure, and Dr. Hans-Peter Schmitz. And so they are teaching, and our faculty are generally a mix. So we're not all practitioner focused teaching, but we are, the majority of our electives are taught, and a couple of our core courses are taught by practitioners, which, if you're a program director, especially over the last few years, provides for really, I mean, I spend a lot of my time onboarding practitioners and helping them to teach and helping them to understand that teaching is very different. And it really takes, I think, as Sylvia would agree with me, a really special person to be able to do both, right? And really elegantly. And sometimes they really underestimate the extent of that work. I spend a lot of my management time on that. Lastly, I mean, we've been really seeing ourselves in the PhD spot as planning a field of nonprofit scholars. All these folks came out of our PhD program and out of that work in the center. And I would say that a little bit of our transition is I'm seeing a little less of this right now. I don't know why, maybe because we are so bifurcated from the department in a lot of ways. So we'll see. We still have lots of PhD students in the center doing research, but a lot of them are not going on the academic track. And I'm not really, it's just a trend I thought I would mention. I'm going to stop sharing and I'll tell you about my lessons learned, if that's okay, really quickly, and then we'll get on with it. I kind of retitled this as I tend to do. Will knows I don't follow the rules very often, but it's what I wish I would have known, or what I'm really glad somebody else knew when they started this program. Okay, so what I'm really glad that somebody else knew was that we would really need resources in the future. So I am really lucky because in the beginning years, Pat, and then, in partnership with me, I worked with her for 18 of those 20 years. We developed and seeded a lot of endowment money, which now I'm the benefactor of. I have so much scholarship money and we embedded and built deep relationships in the community. And I say this because as somebody who, Patrick and all of you guys know this, right? If you're around long enough and you see transitions in leadership, some people have different ideas about whether nonprofit programs are important or not. And if you have resources and endowments and deeper connections in the community, you can sometimes withstand those shifts in priorities. And that's been helpful over the years. Not that anything really terrible has happened to us. It's just been extremely beneficial. So the more you can think about it, even though I know if you're a faculty member, it's hard to think, well, should I be raising money? And if you're starting out, if this is for new program directors, I would say start raising money on day one. I mean, like I said, I came from practice, so that was natural for me. But if it's not natural for you, get with your development people and really push, because that was one of the lessons I just kind of wanted to bring forward. Much like Kodak, I feel like I'm talking about like Kodak and some other companies. My other lesson that I wish I would have learned is really to have pushed more for online education earlier. We are so proud of our in-person work, and our university was not equipped and was not as involved in online education. And I really wish we would have been more on the forefront of that, although we're catching up. Universities, even small ones, remain very siloed. So being able to have the fortitude to go toe to toe with your colleagues across campus when they're developing programs that look exactly like yours, or having a dean that has your back when that happens, is another thing that I would I would definitely, or figuring out where you fit into other people's programs. You know, on the way here, I was thinking, where do I fit into our counseling program? Because some of the data are telling us, you know, nonprofit workforce is showing up without the licensing that they need, and not really develop. And so I was just sort of thinking, where do I fit in that program, or can we collaborate? And that's really been working well for us. We've been collaborating with the School of Engineering, which has been really fun, and figuring out, you know, how our social justice mission as a Catholic university really fits nicely with the nonprofit work. But, you know, we are in graduate school. This is the last thing I'll say. We are in graduate school, but I have an undergraduate minor that's seated in the college, right? So we're trying to do a combined degree program, but the college is pretty sure we're not quite ready to take their babies, even though we've had them in our minor for 15 years. So we're just, I mean, I don't have necessarily full influence or control outside of the realm of graduate education. So some of that, making partnerships and understanding how to navigate the inevitable silos that exist and the power structures that exist have been really important for our success. And we can wait and take more questions after that. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Appreciate it. Wes, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Wes Lindahl. I think I know almost everybody on the call today. You probably know me a little bit. A couple things on my background. I have a PhD from Northwestern University in the administration area. I was a fundraiser at Northwestern for 18 years and have served as chair emeritus of the AFP Research Council. A couple books I've written on fundraising, and for 17 years as the founding dean of our School of Business and Nonprofit Management, which I think is one of the unique schools out there, which actually incorporates the nonprofit as a part of the business program right in the name of it. So it's a big part of who we are. Couple things that are sort of unique to us. We have an Axelson Center that actually started before the School of Business and Nonprofit Management. And the Axelson Center is an endowed center. So it originally started with gifts in honor of Niels Axelson, who was an administrator that was honored. And it actually started in 1999. And then at that point, it was a conference and some other programming for the community in terms of the nonprofit community in Chicago. And we then I was brought in to set up this School of Business and Nonprofit Management. And so we added a graduate degree in nonprofit administration in the school. We've added an undergraduate major in the school, and this setup with a Axelson Center is sort of the front line, the front face, if you will, for nonprofit things at North Park, and the school can be confusing to people. So it is clear then that the school has the degrees and the two full-time tenure track professors, that kind of thing. But the center now has become really a place where we provide non-credit programming for the nonprofit community in Chicago. So it is a little bit confusing. And in fact, if we go over to the what I wished I had known list, that actually is number 2 there. Organizing nonprofit programs within a university can be difficult to do in practice and confusing to the outside observer. So we've had this issue throughout time, you know, where is nonprofit stuff located? And so we've been constantly trying to clarify that, you know, the Axelson Center is this connection to the community. And one of the things that we offer is degree programs, which are part of the school with a dean of that school, which is my former position. So that is one thing I wish I had known. And then the second, you know, I had come from fundraising at Northwestern University for 18 years. I mistakenly thought, well, North Park is similar to that, where, you know, at Northwestern, the business school had several fundraisers dedicated to business. And I thought, we at least would be able to ask our business alums for money. And so I found out that no, actually fundraising at North Park is very centralized. So when they have a campaign, it was, here's the building we're going to be building. It's not a business building, it's a science building. And we're going to require you to stop asking people for money for your thing and have them go for the capital campaign, which was this building. So it was a little bit tough. We did, I did eventually develop an advisory board where we get some lower level gifts each year on a regular basis. But that was surprising to me because I did come from Northwestern. And then the third thing is the control of promotion for the graduate program is not distributed to the school itself. And so we were just sort of, on the periphery in terms of suggesting and pleading and hoping that, that the promotion would go on with the graduate program. But it actually is controlled centrally, and they have been focusing on undergraduate recruitment more exclusively over the last few years. And so that's been something that would have been nice to have known. Maybe I could have argued in advance when I took the job back in 2002, we need to control that part of it. And I was not able to do that. And then the last is in a typical business school context, nonprofit management is on the periphery. So I was at AACSB meetings, that's the accreditation group for business schools. When I first became a dean, I thought, oh, let's go to these AACSB meetings and see where different schools are at. Well, I found out very quickly that the nonprofit stuff in a business setting is peripheral. And the only reason that it was not peripheral at North Park is because of our mission as a Christian university, that the service aspect and the nonprofit aspect fit our mission as a university more closely than other business school programs. But it's a constant struggle if you have a nonprofit program in a business setting to not be the odd man out, because it's not where the focus of business schools are. So I think with that, that's about my 5 minutes. Maybe it's a good time for some questions and we can have some discussion.
I was thinking the same thing. Folks got any questions that they'd like to toss back? Or Sal looks like he's getting himself ready.
Yeah, I was wondering if this is great, by the way. I'm learning a lot. I'm taking notes. It's very helpful. I was wondering how each of you dealt with what I'm going to assume is a variance along the continuum of autonomy in your role of director within the political bureaucracy of an academic institution, presidents, provosts, deans, associate deans, whatnot. So how were you able to navigate that, try to, retain, preserve autonomy, make decisions that you thought were right, and as well as understand you have to please the folks above you in the bureaucracy?
I can start. Oh, go ahead.
Well, just that as dean of a school, I think it was helpful for me because I was on the dean's council and so forth. So it was a more standard channel. So it wasn't perfect, but at least I was in the table of the deans. That was helpful.
I was just actually going to say, so similar to Wes, one of the things I didn't mention is that our program is actually in a business school as well. And just like your point, I'm the only one who actually is focused on the nonprofit, and everybody else is focused on the for-profit side of the house. And so in some ways, there's not, I don't want to say as much attention, but maybe that's the right word in terms of it. But the benefit of that, to be honest, has been that there's been a little bit more flexibility. And so that, we have a good working relationship with our dean. We are a small school, so we don't have to jump through a lot of hoops. I will tell you, though, that we've gotten a new president, a new vice president of academic affairs. Our whole senior leadership team has changed in the last 6 months. And so it's to be seen what we're going to have to do. To your point, Sal, is that I think that we're going to have more levels of accountability internally versus externally than we've had before. And that will be a challenge.
All of that and more. And since it's being recorded, maybe we'll meet offline, Sal, but I think what really has worked well for us is constantly playing up our connection to the community. So our bonds with the community are so strong, for the longest time, we were sort of the, I don't want to say poster child for the community work that was being done here, especially at the graduate level. And then definitely through our alumni, for sure, and constantly reminding folks of that. So, I'm lower middle management essentially, right? And really just reminding USD that constantly and putting our students out there that this program it aligns with the mission and the strategic objectives of USD on a regular basis, has gone a long way to keeping it at the forefront of people's minds.
I saw Patrick's comment there. You want me to respond a little bit?
For anybody who wants, but Wes, I especially thought of your situation. I didn't realize that you were so handcuffed.
Yeah, it was a little bit of an issue when I got there. But what I did was to assemble an advisory board. And so I was allowed to ask them for an annual gift. So I had a few $1,000s to fiddle with in our budget every year for that. But like, for example, if we wanted to construct a new business school building, it would have to be something that the central group would support. Or for example, we had a prospect who would have been good for like an endowed chair. And so that person was asked to do something else more centrally for a lower dollar amount compared to what the chair would have been. So, maybe I could have been more aggressive in terms of trying to get around some of the stuff, but you do what you do in the setting that you're in. So it was very centralized fundraising. And so I went along with it and left the large donors to be asked to do central things.
Yeah, and Patrick, I would add to that the bifurcation of our center, the center has to be self-sustaining. So their incentive is to raise money all day long, right? And the department has, because I'm in both places, I can kind of keep track of all of that and we try to leverage and do things together when we can. But I can imagine that if I wasn't, the department would be pretty left behind in terms of funding. And I wanted to add one more thing to Sal's question. The other thing that I think has worked really well is, especially if you have new leadership, involve them in your program, right? Mm-hmm. So when we got a new president, he taught a class in our leadership studies minor program, right? And then, or have them come and speak, because you'd be amazed. Nobody asks them to, right? And then all of a sudden you're on their radar screen.
I actually wanted to mention one other thing, because it was a point that Wes had mentioned as well about marketing and how in your case has been targeted to programs other than yours. And certainly we've experienced the same exact thing, which has affected our enrollment for 2021 in particular. So one of the things that actually has gotten me some results is I took a 5-year look at all of our marketing and everything that has been done from print to radio to TV to whatever. And I correlated it with enrollment as best as I could. And I sent that to our marketing department and to the dean and to our VP of Academic Affairs. And I was pleasantly surprised that they took a look at it and said, yeah, maybe we do need to do a little bit more marketing and focusing on these programs. So, it was, again, I think it's because, in some ways, like, why am I doing a 5-year analysis of marketing? But there's nobody else that can do it. So I did it because I could really see that we were really being affected in a really strong way by having nobody even know how to find us.
For those of you who have faculty who have like either a dual or a dotted line to one part, like the academic part, and a solid line to the center, or vice versa, how do you manage that relationship? Because I think one of the reasons we became a school was as an economist, I would say the transactions costs were larger than you would anticipate when chairs and deans changed, and they didn't want to honor the previous arrangements that had been carefully negotiated. And, it's like, at some point, I'd just rather have my own folks that I know I can count on And anybody else, if you can, get free, come join us.
Well, this has definitely been a problem for me, or a challenge, I would say. Number one, I've just been lucky because when we had to hire externally for the executive director of the center, because I did not want to give up my academic position, somebody said to me, if we get the right person, it will work out. So we really made that a large part of, and so we're really lucky we have a really collaborative, but if it was not the case, I would say it could easily implode and be two very separate entities. And then for me, it's constantly just being honest when, and I feel like I can be with the two people I report to two different people. So I get an academic review and I get an administrator's review, and I just am very honest. We lost a lot of funding opportunities because the center is so prolific at raising money. And oftentimes I'll talk to the center director and say, that's really kind of, you've taken donor XYZ, and I understand why, because the incentive is to be self-sustaining, and then she'll think of something creative we can do. But if that wasn't the makeup of that person, wouldn't happen. So if you have any control over who's hired into those positions, I think looking for that kind of collaborative model is important.
Who you hire is really important. Some of you know Pierre Rogers, who's our director of the Axelson Center. One of my best hires, I think. I pat myself on the back, but she came on board in 2007, and she's just a delight to work with and very easy to coordinate with and so forth. So I think having the right people on there is real important. You don't want to rush that process.
Yeah, Sal, that's been something you guys have experienced, right? How do you balance between what's going on at the Johnson Center versus what's going on at the academic department? And it hasn't always been clear necessarily.
Well, it's not only not clear now, it's separated. So the Johnson Center requested that they not be part of our college anymore.
Right.
And they are now an independent entity, but they have good reason for making that request, in my opinion, because our former College of Community and Public Service, which the name clearly conveys what the units underneath it do, was forcibly merged by our provost, who's no longer here, with the College of Education, which made no programmatic sense, but it was done in the name of saving money, but yet we couldn't see what the savings was. And now we're the College of Education and Community Innovation.
Right.
So I'm sure the Johnson Center looked at that and said, we don't want to, that title is not going to help us any. And we want to separate out. Plus, I think by separating out, they're probably working a deal where they can break free from this centralized fundraising, which has been talked about, today, that was hampering them when they were part of the college. So I don't blame them. But now that separation, we're losing, in my opinion, a lot of the synergy in the dialogue that we had. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because I hadn't thought about it really, to be honest with you. I mean, we're still obviously embedded within the department for our center here. But at what point does it make sense to be more of a college level institute or even separate from, right? And how much are you, I mean, all of most centers, Alicia, I don't know about yours, but most centers, right, don't have much academic control, curricular control over the degree programs. That's all within a department or done by others.
I think that blending is rare. I mean, Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we had that blending when I was in the PhD program.
Yeah.
IUPUI, because our faculty were very active in the center doing research, but yet they taught our courses. And as a graduate assistant, I was involved in all those pieces, and it was beautiful. I mean, the synergy was just thriving, and everybody was benefiting. So it might be rare, but I think that is an example of how it can work.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I'm complaining about the transactions cost only because it was an issue for me, but overall it worked well. But one of the reasons for becoming a school, now I will say, having become a school, many of the affiliate faculty members who were in other schools have become less involved with us than they were in the past. Not all, but several. And in fact, several of their chairs and deans have said, if you want to cooperate, collaborate, whatever, with the school, that won't count towards service for our school anymore, whereas before they did. So the schools on campus are like actively kind of digging a deeper moat, raising a bigger wall to say a center on philanthropy, that's one thing, a school of philanthropy, that's another thing. And so it's changed. I mean, overall it's been great, but it makes me sad that people that used to come to all of our faculty meetings, used to serve on committees, used to teach gladly for us, now are not. And again, not all, but quite a few.
Any other questions out there? Folks I got a couple. I got a list, but Laura, you got one? What? I was thinking about degree programs. If folks wanted, I mean, Sylvia came up in particular as you sort of threw up your list of numerous degree programs. I was curious to hear from, you can reflect on it too. Like, how is that as a way to sort of think about owning the market or capturing a little bit of the market, right? So you say you don't get a lot of students in any given degree program, but you do increase the number of students that are attracted to your college and in the overall work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that really kind of relates to one of the more recent things we did, which was embedding a certificate into the nonprofit degree so that they would take the 8 required courses and the 4 additional ones. And it's just that in talking with students and seeing what it is that they're interested in, most of our students, and I'm sure most of you are the same, tend to be, in their 30s, like kind of moving up the path, and they know that they have to know something about fundraising. So they'll either come to us because we do have one of the, I know certain, Patrick, you have an MA in philanthropic studies, but there aren't a lot of programs that are just fundraising or fund development. And so we just sort of tested the market, to be honest with you, to see whether or not that was something students would be interested in. And admissions has really kind of reported to us that has increased the interest. And so it both prepares them, I think, in a way that's a little bit more intensive in terms of what you need to do in leadership. Because as we're talking about, we have to know something about fundraising within our sector. And at the same time, honestly, it does differentiate our degree a little bit differently.
We're differentiated around combination with the MBA, which is sort of fun. So nonprofit students will say, do I want a nonprofit administration degree or do I want an MBA? And so we actually have 5 electives for each of the programs. Mm-hmm. So you could do the MBA and do 5 nonprofit electives into that, or you could do the M&A and do 5 MBA program or classes as a part of it. So I think that is sort of our unique strength. And I don't know if that would happen very well if you didn't have like control of the business school with somebody who had a nonprofit mind. So it is helpful maybe to have a dean from the nonprofit side as head of it for 17 years.
Yeah, and we also just kind of like you have, Laura, is that we've embedded a major in nonprofits, but it's with our business undergraduate degree, kind of similar to what you're talking about, Wes, is that they get their degree in business, but they take, I think, 5 courses, and then they can major in nonprofit studies. And those courses also translate to our graduate degree program.
Yeah, we also have an undergraduate major in nonprofit, but it's so not as popular compared to our regular business program. It's sort of interesting.
Yeah.
And we can't even utter the word major just yet. So it's a minor. But I think this is really interesting for all of us to think about how our work is centered in things that universities are becoming very interested in.
Right.
Racial justice, social justice, and where that plays out is the field that we've all been part of for so long, and reminding them and kind of keeping in check with everything that's getting developed, right? It's really hard to do, but reminding them that they already have a home in a place that's on their university, well-respected programming, right? So that's just another trend I've noticed. I think we all saw it with social enterprise. the business school has a social enterprise program. We have a social enterprise program. Somebody else has a social, and then it becomes these turf wars when we could really, I think one thing we're doing really well at USD is we've elevated some of these topics, these what urgent challenges, environmental piece. Can you thread the environmental thing throughout all of your programming? And that's been really interesting for us. And we've been pretty successful at it. So, that's just sort of some of the trends I've seen in that area.
Yeah, I think I've always had that sort of question about how is it that I help folks imagine what it is that I bring, or imagining what it is that I bring in some ways, right? As an organizational person, a lot of times I tend to frame it perhaps a little bit more narrowly than is always the most useful in some ways. Sometimes I think it does have to be conceptualized a little broader about how what we're trying to do in the nonprofit studies area adds value for other places, and to be able to articulate that a little more clearly. I mean, there's some really interesting stuff going on in urban planning and around the spaces there, but we're not necessarily having substantive conversations per se. Could be very interesting.
Laura, like in your center, do the faculty have a reporting line to you, or is it just parallel and separate?
Were you asking me, Patrick?
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. There's a faculty member who is, if they're working in the center, because we have our time split, he did report to me, but only on center things. So Marcus and Hans do not report to me, nor would they ever want to, but they do have to, for example, if they want to bring forward a new class, I have to approve it, things like that. But all the adjuncts report to me.
So to whom do they report for their
Department chair.
department chair?
We all report. We have the same department yet. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, it's just fascinating. I mean, there's all permutations possible, I guess, but it's, and in theory, the reporting lines don't matter because you can, if you bring resources that people want to play in that sandbox with, you can get people's time. But if you have a reporting line relationship, that's another lever you can push on in terms of, time. And
I think it's kind of hard for them sometimes because we hired them to teach in our program, right? And if they want to develop coursework that's more that doesn't fit in our program, the priority is they have to teach in our program first. We're really lucky because we can be really entrepreneurial, so it's not a problem. But these are just things we have to negotiate kind of regularly.
Yeah, you've got two good people, so that makes it better.
Yes.
But it's still hard. I'm sure if they have, when you bifurcate the interest, the intent, and the budget, then it just makes it harder for the person in your position, but it also makes it harder for the entire enterprise to do what it really needs to do.
Well, it was really hard back when we were all together because the former director did think that she was the boss of tenure line faculty, and that never worked out well because she didn't have a PhD. So it was a constant battle. So things are we just kind of work through them now, but that, she very much saw herself as their direct boss.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll ask the looking ahead question a little bit. We have plenty of time, but what do you see looking ahead with your programs? What are the challenges that you're dealing with that you want to try and address? But are there additions, modifications? Yeah. How do you see what's coming down the pike, right? I think Laura, you mentioned it with there's trends potentially going on within universities that we can tap into. There is overall, I think certainly increased awareness of nonprofit studies generally across a lot of areas. People seem to understand now when you say nonprofit. We've settled in on that language, whether it's optimal or not. Patrick says, philanthropic studies, I look down there, right? But the reality is the language that seems to generate with the market. But I'm curious, people's thoughts about what the market reacts to, enrollment trends, programmatic things that you might be doing. Anybody want to take a stab at thinking about what comes up?
Well, I'm concerned on budgets for some of the smaller schools coming out of COVID. Our budget has been down over the last couple of years, and they look for places to close down or to change. And you're always thinking, would our program be next and so forth, and it hasn't so far. So I think it's survived just fine. But it would be nice if the enrollments in the graduate program, rebounded to where they were before COVID. And part of that, I think, is the industry itself. Nonprofit leaders look for experience more than the degree, and so if there could be a cultural change in the industry where people say, "Gee, some experience is obviously needed, but if you can have people with the same amount of experience, but one of them has a master's degree in the nonprofit area, let's hire that person and make use of that." But I don't see that as a part of the culture yet. So that would be something to look forward to in my mind.
Yeah, no, we've seen that as well. I mean, as we launched the executive EMBSA program, where we had the three options: public management, homeland security, and nonprofits. The nonprofit certificate was the largest going into it, but coming now 3 years into this thing, we're the smallest degree component, right? Everybody goes homeland security or public management, because those are the ones that recognize the management master's degree and value it and give them promotions, give them raises. They can't move to next levels of professional experience without a master's degree in some of those instances. But for nonprofits, it's not as critical, it's not as necessary, right?
Yeah.
If they've worked 5 years, then that gains them what they need. Sal, what you thinking about?
Yeah, to this point, I was wondering, do any of you proactively reach out to boards of your local nonprofits so the board members understand, to Wes's point, that this advanced degree could be a tiebreaker, if you will, if you have, a bunch of candidates and you're deciding on who to pick?
Well, we have an advisory board from different community members, nonprofits, and so forth, and hopefully we're working with that. But there are 20,000 nonprofits in Chicago alone, so that the chance of really changing the culture with just a small group is a little bit difficult.
Yeah, true.
I think boards, it's interesting. Boards would be one place to go, but I think, enrollment is tricky right now for all the reasons that you already all mentioned. One thing I think that that's been on my mind anyway is, we're coming out of the pandemic, really looking at how fresh is are we keeping up with practice? For a long time, we were leading practice, but are we keeping up with practice? Or are we teaching the same old, stuff? And so like some of that critical perspectives and some of that, really kind of taking a critical look at that. But also, Sal, to your point, partnering with large institutions is kind of where I've been going lately, who have many employees, right? We're not saturated here. I did an analysis. There are more people that work in the nonprofit sector that are than teach in our public school system here, right? So when I told that, because our dean's like, "I think your program's saturated," and I said, "Well, there's teaching programs at all the 5 major universities in San Diego. We're the only nonprofit program, so I still don't think we're saturated yet. But it's just been a tough nut to crack in the last 2 or 3 years. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But like partnering with like a YMCA or for us like a Catholic Charities, and really kind of doing reaching out to them about their employees is the strategy that we're following right now.
Yeah, we're starting to do some of the similar things, looking at some of the larger nonprofits in particular that would have a larger pool of employees that would be interested in getting degrees in either one of the 2 areas that we're talking about. But I just wanted to mention something that somebody had mentioned earlier in terms of one of the trends, and for us, and this could just be restricted to us, but we're finding that there's a lot of internal competition between our different degree programs. So for example, we have a School of Health and Human Services. We have a PA program, an OT program, all kinds of health-focused degrees. They bring in probably 70% of the revenue on the graduate school. So in big surprise, they're getting all the attention. And it makes it harder and harder to kind of get the university to understand that even a program, so for example, we still have a pretty good net profit in terms of enrollment. in tuition versus what our costs are, but it doesn't compare to like a PA program or an OT program. And when you get people that, like our dean, for example, who really just is looking at, what is the bottom line here in terms of the profits versus loss on these programs, it's just really hard to sort of compete internally in terms of resources.
Any other last words, thoughts? Laura, go on ahead.
I think my last word would be, for those of us that have been at this as long as some of us have been, I can remember, with the advent of social enterprise, people saying, well, the nonprofit sector won't be around in 10 years, right?
Right.
Well, it's been 20 years now. And so I just sort of think, where do we go next? That's it's kind of
Right.
exciting.
Right, because I mean, I was told probably don't go in, nonprofits is not the place to go for a career, right? When I started, right, and I was supposed to stay as a psychology department or maybe something else, right? And it's clear that was not necessary and turned out to be fortunate.
I guess I would just say education. And so we're certainly talking about education externally in terms of nonprofits or boards or potential candidates, but also internal education. So another example is, our school loves to use grades data in terms of looking at degree programs. Well, neither one of our degrees has the right kind of code. So I spend a lot of time, again, sort of looking at the Johns Hopkins material, the BLS material, what it looks like in Massachusetts and Connecticut about employment, and just constantly am educating the dean and the administration about the fact that there is a lot of jobs. Massachusetts in particular, for such a small state, it's about 15% of the workforce is nonprofits, which is a lot higher than a national average. And so it's just this constant process because I'm the only one who actually works in the nonprofit field within our business school, except for the part-time faculty that work with us. So that would be my last word. Just keep educating so that people really understand the full context and don't make assumptions about what's going on in the field.
And my last word is sort of a personal one. After 17 years as dean, stepping down to do teaching the last few years until I retire, I love it. It's been a lot of fun. Don't have to have all the headaches. Just can have some great interaction with students, and I'm having a great time.
Congrats, Wes. That's nice. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good
Thank
to
you,
see everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoy the
Take
rest of your
care.
days.
Nice.
So,
Take care.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.